On the frozen plains of Montana, where storms swallow men whole and whispers can ruin a life, a woman lives alone, branded as cursed by her town, abandoned by everyone she ever loved. But one night, her German shepherd tears into the blizzard, barking at something buried in the snow. What Anna Mitchell finds there will change everything. A man on the edge of death, a secret heavy enough to crush a soul, and a choice that could cost her the little she has left. Was it fate? Was it madness? Or was it a miracle sent by God Himself? Stay with me, because once you hear what happened next, you'll never forget it. The winter night in Montana stretched vast and merciless, a white wilderness where the wind howled like a pack of wolves across the endless plains. Snow fell in thick sheets, blinding and relentless, swirling into the dark corners of the abandoned streets and hammering against the wood of cabins that clung to the land like tired survivors. The small settlement of Pine Hollow, no more than a scatter of houses and barns on the edge of the wilderness, lay silent except for the storm. Lanterns had long been extinguished, doors bolted shut against the freezing gusts, and chimneys carried the smell of burning pine into the night. Yet far beyond the clustered homes, on the lonely stretch of prairie where no one willingly ventured, one cabin still clung to its fragile warmth. It belonged to Anna Mitchell. Anna Mitchell, 28 years old, was a woman shaped by silence and rumor, a slender figure with narrow shoulders and long arms hardened by years of toil. Her auburn hair, once thick and flowing, was now usually tied in a rough braid, flecked with frost when she returned from tending her animals. Her skin, pale from long winters spent away from sunlight, carried faint freckles across her cheeks, and her green-gray eyes had the look of someone who expected disappointment before kindness. She had grown tall, almost 5'8", her frame thin but sinewy, the sort of strength forged not from abundance, but from stubborn survival. To the townsfolk of Pine Hollow, Anna was the cursed daughter of a cursed family. Years ago, when sickness swept the valley and stole her parents and siblings within weeks, whispers began. The Mitchell farm is haunted, some said. Bad luck clings to her like shadow, others muttered. In truth, it was disease, swift and cruel, that had taken them. But fear and superstition outlived fact. From then on, people crossed the street rather than meet Anna's eyes. Mothers tugged their children close when she entered the mercantile. Even the pastor's wife looked at her as if misfortune itself sat on her shoulders. The loneliness carved itself deep into Anna, leaving her guarded, self-reliant, a woman who spoke little because words rarely brought kindness. Her only constant was Rex. The German shepherd was 3 years old, a muscular animal with a proud chest, tall pointed ears, and a thick coat mottled in black and tan. His eyes, sharp amber, missed nothing. He carried himself with the disciplined watchfulness of a guardian. Anna's father had raised dogs his whole life, but Rex had been his last gift, a pup placed into Anna's hands before fever stole him away. From the beginning, Rex had been more than a dog. He was her protector, her companion, and in many ways, the only creature who had not abandoned her. Fiercely loyal, he patrolled the cabin and its thin line of fence as though guarding a fortress, and in the rare moments Anna laughed, it was usually because of Rex's bounding joy when she threw a stick across the yard. That night, as the blizzard screamed across the land, Anna worked inside her cabin, feeding kindling into the stove. The firelight painted the log walls in gold, though every creak in the timber told her how fragile the warmth was against the freezing world outside. Rex paced near the door, restless, ears twitching to sounds beyond the human ear. Anna, weary from the day's work, muttered to him to settle down. But suddenly, the dog stiffened, growled low, and lunged toward the door, barking with a force that rattled the shutters. "Rex, what is it?" Anna called, but the dog ignored her, clawing at the door. Alarm prickled through her. Rex was protective, yes, but this was different, urgent, desperate. With effort, she pulled on her heavy wool coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and opened the door against the weight of the storm. Snow swept in, burning her face with its sting. Rex leapt forward into the blizzard, disappearing into white. Anna swore under her breath and followed, boots sinking deep into drifts. The wind tore at her shawl and made her eyes water. "Rex!" she shouted, but the storm devoured her voice. She stumbled after him, following the dark shape bounding ahead until she saw what had drawn him. There, half buried in the snow against the shadow of the barn, lay a man. He was slumped against the wooden wall, his body twisted as if he had crawled until strength failed him. His coat was torn and stained dark across the side, the snow around him pink with frozen blood. His face was pale, lips blue with cold, and a thin layer of frost clung to the dark stubble across his jaw. The man was tall, broad-shouldered even in collapse, his hair a mess of black matted against his forehead. Though unconscious, his expression carried the hard edges of someone who had lived rough years, creases across his brow, a scar through one eyebrow, and the hollows of his cheeks speaking of hunger and travel. This was Jacob Reed, 35, a drifter by necessity more than choice, though Anna did not yet know his name. Rex barked sharply, tugging at the man's sleeve with his teeth, then turned to Anna as if demanding her help. Anna's heart pounded. She had been shunned by the world for years, told she brought nothing but misfortune. Yet here was fate laying a broken stranger at her door. She knelt, her gloved hands shaking as she touched his throat. A pulse, faint but present. His chest rose shallowly, each breath ragged. The bullet wound had nearly claimed him, but not yet. For a moment Anna hesitated, fear gnawing at her ribs. To bring him inside was to invite danger, gossip, more whispers of scandal. But the thought of leaving him, watching the storm swallow him whole, was unbearable. She knew too well what it meant to be abandoned when the world turned cruel. "Come on," she muttered, sliding her arms beneath his shoulders. His weight was immense, every step dragging her down, but stubbornness drove her. Rex circled anxiously, barking encouragement, nipping at her coat as if to lend his strength. Inch by inch, they pulled Jacob Reed across the snow, through the biting wind, toward the fragile glow of the cabin. By the time she kicked the door closed behind them, Anna's lungs burned, her arms screamed with effort, and her hair clung wet against her cheeks. She lowered the man onto a rug near the stove, the firelight revealing the full cruelty of his wound. Blood had seeped through shirt and coat, his skin clammy, breaths uneven. For a moment Anna stood trembling, staring at him, at the stranger fate had thrown into her exile. Rex settled beside him, head low, ears forward, eyes locked on Anna as if demanding the next move. The storm raged outside, snow battering against the shutters, but inside a new battle had begun. The life of Jacob Reed now rested in the hands of a woman the town had written off as cursed, and in the watchful guard of a loyal dog who refused to let death have its way. And so, as the blizzard roared over Montana's plains, Anna Mitchell's story changed course. Not because of the town that shunned her, but because a dog found a broken man in the snow and refused to let him die alone. Anna Mitchell had carried the stranger inside with the storm still clawing at her door, and now the weight of what she had done pressed on her chest, harder than the icy wind ever could. The man lay stretched on the ragged wool rug before the stove, his body trembling with each shallow breath, his blood soaking through the rough cloth she had pressed against his side. His face was ashen, his lips tinged purple, his jaw covered in a scruff of dark stubble that emphasized the harsh angles of his cheekbones. Even in his half-dead state, there was something hard and unyielding in his expression, as if life had carved stone into his features. This was no farmhand or passing trader. He bore the scars of violence, the marks of someone who had fought and lost too many times. Anna pushed aside her fear. She had chosen to bring him in. Now she had to see it through. Rex circled once, then planted himself by the door, his broad chest rising and falling, ears flicking at every gust outside. The dog's amber eyes stayed fixed on the man, not with suspicion, but with a soldier's vigilance. He had been trained by Anna's father to guard, to protect, and now, with the same loyalty, Rex seemed to understand that the stranger's survival was suddenly bound to Anna's own. Anna knelt beside the man. She pressed her hand to his neck again. The pulse was weak but steady, fluttering like a bird caught in a storm. His coat, once a heavy duster meant for riders, was shredded where the bullet had torn through, and the fabric clung stiff with frozen blood. She forced herself to breathe steadily. Panic would kill him faster than the wound. "Hold on," she whispered, though he could not hear. She fetched the knife her father had once used for skinning deer, a long steel blade worn but strong. Her hands shook as she laid it on the stove's flame. The metal glowed faintly, and she clenched her jaw until her teeth hurt. She had delivered calves on her own, stitched up her own torn flesh after falling from the hayloft, but cutting into another human being was different. Still, there was no choice. The bullet had to come out, or he would die before dawn. She stripped away his shirt, cutting through the cloth with trembling fingers. Beneath, his chest was broad, ribcage lifting in ragged heaves. The wound gaped angry and red near his ribs, edges blackened where frost had kissed the blood. She swallowed bile, forcing her mind into cold focus. "Stay still," she murmured, though he was unconscious. His head shifted, lips parting in a low groan. Words slipped out, broken by fever. "Thomas. Margaret. Forgive me." Names Anna didn't know. Ghosts of his past, perhaps. His face twisted with pain even in his sleep, and she wondered what memories chased him here into her storm. She pressed her palm firmly against his chest to keep him steady, then set the knife to the wound. The smell of heated steel mixed with the copper tang of blood filled the cabin. The man jerked violently, a strangled sound tearing from his throat, though his eyes never opened. Anna bore down, gritting her teeth, and worked the blade carefully. Blood welled hot and slick over her fingers, but she did not stop. Rex growled low, pacing, ears flat, but he did not interfere. It was as though he, too, understood this was a battle. Finally, with a sickening tug, the bullet came free. A small, twisted piece of lead, deadly and ordinary, now lay glistening in her palm. She dropped it into a tin cup with a clink that sounded louder than thunder. Her hands trembled, but the hardest part was done. She tore strips from an old shirt, threaded a needle with shaking fingers, and began to sew the wound shut, each stitch crude but firm. The stranger groaned again, murmuring, "Should have been faster. I failed him." She ignored the words, focusing on making her knots hold. When she was done, she pressed clean cloth against the stitches, leaning her weight to slow the bleeding. Her arms ached, her eyes blurred, but she stayed steady. She could not lose him now. Not after pulling him from death's grip. The fire roared low, casting long shadows. The man's breathing grew less ragged, though fever heat was already building under his skin. Anna fetched snow from outside, packing it into a rag, laying it across his brow. Rex settled closer, resting his great head on his paws, eyes still fixed on the man, as if guarding him from the darkness itself. Hours blurred. Anna sat at his side, wiping his sweat, replacing the snow, feeding the fire when it threatened to die. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin, there was only the sound of his struggling breath and the steady crackle of flames. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she did not let herself sleep. Near dawn, the man stirred, eyelids fluttering. His eyes opened briefly, startlingly blue, piercing even in fever. They met Anna's for a fleeting second. His lips moved, cracked and dry. "Please don't leave," he whispered, voice raw as gravel. Then his eyes rolled shut again, and he sank back into unconsciousness. Anna's throat tightened. She had spent years believing no one wanted her near. No one trusted her presence. And now, in her cabin, a stranger begged her not to abandon him. She brushed damp hair from his forehead, her fingers lingering longer than she intended. "I won't," she whispered. "Not tonight." Rex shifted closer, his body pressing against her knee as if sealing her promise. The first pale light of morning seeped through the cracks in the shutters, but the storm had not ended. It was only beginning. And with it began a fight for life that would bind Anna, Jacob, and Rex in ways she could not yet imagine. For 3 days, the storm battered Pine Hollow, and inside the cabin, Anna Mitchell kept watch over the wounded man she had dragged from death. His fever rose and fell like a tide, and every hour she replaced the rag of snow on his forehead, fed the fire, and whispered words that surprised even herself. On the morning of the 4th day, the wind finally quieted, the snow eased, and pale light spread over the land. That same morning, Jacob Reed opened his eyes. He lay weak, unable to move much, his broad chest rising in uneven rhythm. His blue eyes, clearer now, studied the wooden beams above before settling on Anna, who sat at the table mending an old blanket. Her auburn hair was loose from its braid, her face gaunt from sleepless nights, but her green-gray eyes held the same steel as before. Jacob struggled to speak, his voice gravel rough. "Where am I?" "You're in my cabin," Anna replied, setting down her needle. "Montana Plains, near Pine Hollow." He swallowed, the motion painful. "You saved me." She did not answer at once. The truth was more complicated. She had acted, yes, but it had been Rex who refused to let her turn away. The dog now lifted his head from where he lay, curled at Jacob's feet. His pointed ears pricked, his amber eyes sharp. Jacob's gaze softened briefly, and he gave the animal a nod as though acknowledging a fellow soldier. Days passed, and strength slowly returned to Jacob. His frame remained gaunt from loss of blood, his skin pale, but he pushed himself to sit, then to stand with shaky determination. Anna watched his efforts, sometimes scolding, sometimes quietly impressed. One evening, when firelight flickered low, Jacob began to speak not of the wound, but of what lay behind it. "I worked a ranch in Wyoming," he said, his hands clenched around a tin cup of water. His voice was heavy, as if each word weighed more than his body. "The man who owned it, Thomas Carrick, was a good man. Fair, hard, but honest. He gave me work when no one else would. I owed him everything." Jacob paused, his jaw tightening, the scar across his brow catching the light. One night, claim jumpers came, men who wanted his land. I fought, but I wasn't fast enough. Thomas was shot before I could stop them. His fist struck his knee. I should have been faster, should have saved him. Anna listened, her face unreadable. Jacob's blue eyes flicked to her. His daughter, Margaret. She called me a coward, told me to get out, said she never wanted to see me again. So I left, and I've been drifting since. There was silence, filled only by the crackle of wood. Anna drew in a breath. You think you're the only one people whisper about? She turned her gaze to the window where snow still clung. My family died in the sickness. My father, mother, sisters, all gone in less than a month. It wasn't our fault, but the town decided otherwise. Said the Mitchells were cursed. Said God was punishing us. Now they cross the street to avoid me, call me unlucky under their breath. Children throw stones when I pass. Her lips pressed thin. I used to scream back. Now I just keep walking. Jacob's stare lingered on her, measuring the quiet strength beneath the bitterness. He saw the worn hands of a woman who had carried too much alone, the hollow cheeks of someone starved not only of food, but of kindness. For the first time in years, he felt the edge of his own shame soften, recognizing the same weight in another. The days grew longer as winter light began to stretch. Jacob recovered enough to help with small tasks, though Anna often scolded him for lifting more than he should. Rex watched every exchange with the steady calm of a sentinel, his thick coat gleaming when the sun finally broke through the clouds. The dog's loyalty seemed to knit the silence between them. On the 5th morning after Jacob had spoken his truth, a knock rattled the cabin door. Anna stiffened. Visitors were rare. Rex growled low, rising to stand guard. Anna opened the door to reveal Mrs. Clara Jenkins, a woman from town. Clara was in her 40s, stout, with sharp eyes set deep in a broad face. She carried a basket in gloved hands, her breath clouding in the cold. I brought bread, Clara said curtly, shoving the basket forward. Her gray wool dress was plain but neat, her hair pulled into a severe bun. Clara was known for her stern ways. She had lost 2 sons to the fever years ago, and grief had hardened her into a woman who measured everyone by what pain they carried. Anna took the basket, wary. Thank you. Clara's eyes darted inside, landing on Jacob sitting by the fire. Her mouth thinned. So the rumors are true. You've taken in a stranger. Jacob straightened, his shoulders squaring despite his weakness. He did not speak, but his blue gaze met hers, unflinching. Clara sniffed. Be careful, Anna. You know what people say. She turned and trudged back into the snow without waiting for reply. Anna shut the door, her jaw tight. That's what it's like, she said bitterly to Jacob. Even kindness comes with judgment. Jacob leaned back, his eyes on the fire. People see what they want to see. They don't care about truth. He looked at her then, voice softer. But I see you, a woman who saved a man when she had every reason not to. That isn't cursed. That's strength. For a moment, Anna could not speak. She turned away, busying herself with the basket, but her heart pounded with something unfamiliar, the warmth of being seen without contempt. Outside, the snow melted slowly into rivulets, carrying the memory of the storm away. Inside, 2 souls burdened by ghosts began to realize they were not as alone as the world had told them. The thaw came slowly to Pine Hollow. Snow still clung in patches to the hillsides, but the sun melted the drifts into streams that ran across wagon ruts and turned the ground into sucking mud. Jacob Reed, though not fully healed, had begun to split firewood outside the cabin. His tall frame stooped, but determined. Each swing of the axe showed the stubbornness carved into his muscles, even as his wound ached beneath the stitches Anna had sewn. Inside, Anna Mitchell kept her eyes on the chores, though every sound of the axe echoed in her chest, like a reminder of the danger he carried with him. Rex lay stretched across the threshold, head on his paws, amber eyes half closed but ears flicking to every sound. Rumors, like the thaw, had spread quickly. Mrs. Clara Jenkins's visit had been only the beginning. By the following week, whispers rolled through the mercantile that Anna Mitchell, the cursed girl of Pine Hollow, had taken in a drifter, that she kept him under her roof, sharing meals, sharing firelight. Some whispered worse. Gossip was a sickness, and in Pine Hollow it spread quicker than fever ever had. On a Sunday morning, while Jacob tried to mend a broken harness strap, the sound of horses drew near. Rex sprang to his feet, hackles rising, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. Anna stepped onto the porch just as 5 riders came into view, their figures stark against the pale light. Leading them was Reverend Samuel Yates, a tall man in his 50s with thinning gray hair combed back severely, his black coat buttoned to the throat. His face was narrow, eyes small and sharp as flint. Known for his fiery sermons, Yates preached more fear than grace, his voice heavy with the conviction that sin lurked in every shadow. Years ago, his only daughter had run away with a gambler, and some whispered that his bitterness since then had colored every judgment he made. Beside him rode Sheriff Denton, a broad man with a square jaw and mustache trimmed neat, his brown uniform coat dusted with trail dirt. Denton was not unkind by nature, but he had learned to bend beneath the weight of the Reverend's authority. In Pine Hollow, the pulpit often spoke louder than the law. 3 elders followed. Elder Hollis, thin and stooped, father of the mercantile owner. Elder Briggs, heavy-set with a ruddy face and deep-set eyes that missed nothing. And Elder Mathers, a gaunt man whose hands trembled from age but whose tongue still cut sharp. Anna's stomach tightened as they dismounted. Rex moved to stand in front of her, ears stiff, tail low but bristling, a growl rising from his throat. Jacob came from the side of the cabin, his blue eyes narrowing, his stance straight despite the weakness that still lingered. "Miss Mitchell," Reverend Yates began, his voice smooth but heavy with false concern. "We come with the good of the community at heart." Anna lifted her chin. "What business brings 5 men to my door?" Yates's eyes flicked to Jacob, then to Rex. "It has come to our attention that you are harboring an unmarried man beneath your roof, a stranger, no less. You live here alone, and yet—" He let the silence linger, allowing the weight of suggestion to fill it. Jacob stepped forward, his hand resting on the cabin wall for balance. "I work here. I help with wood, with mending. That's all." Elder Hollis snorted. "A man doesn't bleed on your floor and take your bread for free without asking something in return. This town has its morals, girl." His voice cracked like a whip. Anna's cheeks burned, but before she could speak, Jacob's voice cut low, dangerous. "Watch your words." Sheriff Denton shifted in his saddle, unease flickering in his eyes. "Now, Jacob, no one's accusing of improper conduct, but folks are talking. They say it isn't right." "Folks said it wasn't right when my family died," Anna shot back, her voice trembling but fierce. "They called it a curse. They crossed the street as if grief was disease. I've lived with your whispers all my life. Do you think I care for them now?" Reverend Yates's mouth tightened. It is not whispers, but concern for the boy. He gestured toward Rex with a frown, mistaking the dog's low growl for a child's cry. Anna's eyes widened, fury sparking. "There is no boy here," she snapped. "Only me and what my father left me." She reached down, resting her hand on Rex's head. The German shepherd pressed forward, standing solid between her and the men, his amber eyes locked on Yates with a predator's focus. Yates cleared his throat, recovering. "Be that as it may, it is not fitting for a woman alone to share her home with a man. If Jacob Reed does not leave, we will bring the matter before the council, and should the council judge it improper, you may find yourself without land, without protection. Pine Hollow will not shelter sin." The words struck like a lash. Anna's heart pounded, but she saw Jacob tense, his jaw clenching, his hand brushing his stitched side. Slowly, he nodded once, as if resigning himself. "If it means she keeps her place," he said hoarsely, "I'll go." Rex barked suddenly, loud and sharp, startling the horses. The dog lunged a step forward, snarling, blocking Jacob from moving. His whole body radiated defiance, as though he understood that departure meant more than leaving. It meant surrender. Anna felt tears sting her eyes. For years she had bowed her head, endured the whispers, swallowed the pain. But as she saw Rex standing unyielding, Jacob ready to sacrifice himself, and the Reverend's cold eyes demanding her silence, something in her broke. Her voice came raw, torn from a place deeper than fear. "You've taken everything already," she cried, her voice rising over the wind. "My family, my name, my place in this town. But I will not let you take more. Not him, not this dog, not what little I have left. No more." The Juck's men shifted, surprise flickering on their faces. Reverend Yates's lips thinned, but he did not press further. He swung into his saddle with stiff grace. 3 days, he said flatly. "If Jacob Reed is not gone by then, we will act." They rode away, the sound of hooves fading into the hills. Silence fell heavy. Jacob turned to Anna, his face lined with guilt. "I won't let them hurt you. I'll leave before it comes to that." Rex growled, pressing against Jacob's leg, blocking his path, as though refusing to allow the words to take form. Anna wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice trembling but fierce. "They've taken enough. If you go, they win. And I can't lose again." For the first time, Jacob saw the rawness beneath her quiet strength, and he realized leaving might wound her more than staying ever could. By the time the first crocuses pushed through the thawing earth, Pine Hollow had shaken off its winter silence. The air smelled of damp soil and wood smoke, and the townsfolk busied themselves preparing for the spring dance, the one event that drew even the most reclusive farmers into the old town hall. Lanterns were polished, fiddle strings tightened, and the women sewed ribbons into dresses that carried the promise of renewal. Yet for Anna Mitchell, the coming dance was not a celebration, but a battlefield. She remembered Reverend Yates's ultimatum. She remembered Jacob Reed's quiet willingness to sacrifice himself. And she remembered Rex, standing firm at the door, refusing to yield. Now, with spring, came the choice: live hidden in fear, or walk openly into the light. On the morning of the dance, Anna dressed with deliberate care. She wore her mother's old dress, cream-colored cotton, patched at the seams but brushed clean. Her auburn hair, usually tied in a work braid, was pinned back loosely, framing her pale face. Her green-gray eyes, once dulled by years of solitude, now glimmered with determination. Jacob, though still favoring his side, cleaned himself with the precision of a soldier. His dark hair was combed, his jaw shaved smooth for the first time since arriving, revealing the strong lines of his face and the scar carved across his brow. His blue eyes held the wary steadiness of a man who had faced judgment before and knew it would come again. Rex, his coat brushed until it gleamed, padded proudly at their side, his ears alert, tail carried high as though he too knew what this day meant. They walked into town together, drawing stairs before they even reached the hall. The building itself was modest. Whitewashed planks, broad double doors, lanterns hung above, but inside it was alive with sound and light. Fiddlers tuned their instruments, children ran between skirts, and men gathered in corners with mugs of cider. The moment Anna, Jacob, and Rex entered, the music faltered, and whispers swept the room like dry leaves. Women clutched each other's arms, men narrowed their eyes, and children were pulled back by their mothers' hands. Anna felt the weight of 100 eyes, but she kept her chin high. Rex close at her leg, Jacob steady beside her. The first to approach was Martha Yates, the Reverend's wife. Unlike her husband, Martha carried gentleness in her manner, though it was cautious and subdued. She was a small woman in her 40s, her brown hair streaked with gray, her figure slight. Her blue dress was plain, her eyes soft with the sorrow of someone long accustomed to living in her husband's shadow. She stepped forward, voice quiet but audible. "Anna, I'm glad you came. It's been too long since we had young faces at these gatherings." Her words were not approval, but they were not condemnation either. For Anna, that small courtesy was enough to steady her steps. Next came old Mr. Henderson, a rancher, with a back bent from decades of work, but hands still strong as oak roots. His face was lined deeply, his eyes a faded blue. He studied Jacob for a long moment before saying gruffly, "Heard you can work leather. I could use a good hand on my ranch." The offer was plain, but beneath it was something more. Acknowledgement, if not acceptance. Jacob inclined his head. "I'd be grateful, sir." Not everyone softened. Elder Hollis stood stiff near the punch bowl, his thin mouth curled in disdain. His son, the mercantile owner, whispered loud enough for Anna to hear. Living in sin, parading it in front of everyone. Others nodded agreement, their faces sharp with judgment. Still, there were cracks in the wall of scorn. The young blacksmith, a broad-shouldered man named Caleb Foster with soot still under his fingernails, gave Jacob a nod of respect. A young mother thanked Anna quietly for once helping her sick child years ago, a memory that had not been erased by gossip. The fiddles struck up again. Jacob shifted uncomfortably, his tall frame awkward in the crowd. "I can't dance worth a damn," he murmured. Anna smiled faintly, holding out her hand. "I don't care." She pulled him onto the floor. The townsfolk watched as the two of them moved among the dancers. Jacob's steps were clumsy at first, his boots heavy, but Anna guided him with patient grace. The candlelight glowed against her pale skin, her laughter soft but real. For years she had lived as a ghost among them. Tonight, she was flesh and breath, a woman refusing shame. Rex lay at the edge of the dance floor, ears twitching at the music, eyes following their every step like a guardian angel in fur. By the time the music ended, something in the air had shifted. No miracle had occurred. Many still looked on with scorn, but the whispers were quieter, the stares less sharp. Even Sheriff Denton, leaning in the corner, tipped his hat to Jacob with a gesture that spoke of reluctant acknowledgement. Anna felt something break open inside her. Not the town's acceptance, but her own prison of fear. She was free, no matter their verdict. The evening waned, lanterns flickering low. Outside, the sky stretched deep and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the prairie. On the walk home, Jacob's hand brushed hers, then lingered. At the cabin door, he hesitated, his voice rougher than usual. "I don't have much to give," he said, pulling a small object from his pocket. It was a ring carved from wood, smooth but simple, with a tiny turquoise stone pressed into its center. "I can't buy gold or silver, but I made this for you, from what this land gave me." His blue eyes, fierce yet uncertain, met hers. "Anna, will you marry me?" Her breath caught. The world had called her cursed, unwanted, unworthy. Yet here stood a man who had bled on her floor, who had chosen her despite the whispers. She slipped the ring onto her finger, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Rex gave a sharp bark, as if sealing the vow. As the first light of dawn spread across the prairie, painting the grass gold, Anna, Jacob, and Rex stood together at the threshold of the cabin. They were not perfect, not accepted by all, but they were no longer alone. For in that fragile morning light, a new family had been born. One built not of bloodlines or approval, but of loyalty, resilience, and love. Sometimes the greatest miracles are not thunder from the heavens or fire written across the sky, but the quiet choices of ordinary souls who refuse to give up. Anna and Jacob did not find gold, nor did the town suddenly transform overnight. What they found was something far greater: the courage to stand, the loyalty of a dog who would not let them fall, and the grace of God whispering that even the most broken life can be made new. And perhaps that is the lesson for all of us. In our everyday lives, when we feel judged, misunderstood, or pushed aside, there is still hope. Every act of kindness, every refusal to surrender, every moment we choose love over fear is a miracle in itself. God's hand moves not only in storms and lightning, but in the quiet strength He gives us to keep walking forward. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Let others know what it means to you, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss more stories of faith, resilience, and love. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He watch over you and your family, and may His quiet miracles find you in the places you least expect.